Love is not about finding someone to live with. It's about finding someone you can't imagine living without. Good evening, everyone. I want to start by saying this. Love is supposed to be a beautiful thing. It's supposed to lift us up, help us grow, and remind us that we are worthy of respect, care, and understanding. But sometimes we find ourselves in situations that feel anything but beautiful. Situations that drain us, manipulate us, and ultimately leave us questioning who we are. So how do we define toxic love? At first glance, toxic love might seem like any other relationship. Maybe you get butterflies when you see your partner, or you can remember the excitement of the early days when everything felt perfect. But over time, cracks start to show. The relationship becomes more about control than care, more about manipulation than mutual respect. Let's start by identifying the signs. You might be in a toxic relationship if you constantly feel drained, if you feel emotionally exhausted, like you're giving more than you're receiving. That's a red flag. Relationships are meant to be a give and take. When the balance shifts, you may be giving too much of yourself away, and eventually there's nothing left to give. Your boundaries are constantly violated. True love honors boundaries. If you're constantly being asked to compromise your values, your needs, or your sense of self to make someone else happy, and you're no longer in a relationship of equality, you're in a situation of control. You feel isolated. Toxic love often isolates you from others, your friends, your family, the people who love and support you. When your partner tries to alienate you from your support system, they're weakening your sense of self, making it harder for you to leave. Constant drama or manipulation. There's always drama, always an issue. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells, unsure of when the next emotional outburst will occur, or constantly trying to fix the situation, it's a sign of a toxic dynamic. The scariest part? Sometimes we don't even realize we're in a toxic relationship until it's too late. The emotional manipulation is so subtle that it feels normal, but it's not, and it doesn't have to be this way. When I look back at some of the characters I've portrayed, one thing stands out. Many of them had to go through a process of self-reformation to understand their own role in perpetuating unhealthy patterns. When I talk about the behaviors of self-reformation to understand their own role in perpetuating unhealthy patterns, that's the hard part. It's easy to point the finger, to blame someone else for your pain, but true growth happens when you look inward and recognize your own part in the story. Learn God's peace. Take Training Day, for example. In that film, my character Alonzo is a man who has fallen so deeply into the darkness of his own actions that he can no longer distinguish right from wrong. He's lost sight of the person he once was, consumed by power, greed, and a need for control. At first, Alonzo thinks he can manipulate the world around him, but ultimately, he is consumed by his own lies, greed, and a need for control over eternities. Greed, what can we learn from this? That toxic love often starts with one person failing to take responsibility for their actions. When you refuse to look at your own patterns, you'll keep making the same mistakes. Hurt people hurt people. Healing begins when you take responsibility for your own actions and acknowledge your role in maintaining a toxic dynamic. When you recognize that you have the power to change your life, everything changes. Toxic love doesn't just affect your mental well-being, it affects your physical health, your spirit, and your future. You can't pour from an empty cup. When you're in a toxic relationship, you're constantly giving away pieces of yourself until one day there's nothing left. In my career, I've taken on roles that required me to understand the emotional toll that these kinds of relationships take. In The Hurricane, I played Reuben Hurricane Carter, a man who was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. While in prison, he faced loneliness, betrayal, and the erosion of his dignity. And yet, Even through this incredibly painful experience, he found a way to rise, to fight, and to reclaim his humanity. I tell you this because toxic love is like being imprisoned in your own mind. It makes you question who you are, what you're worth, and whether you deserve more. It can rob you of your confidence, your peace of mind, and your sense of purpose. But here's the good news. Just as Hurricane Carter broke free from his wrongful imprisonment, you too can break free from the prison of toxic love. The emotional scars that come with toxic relationships can be long written, but they are not permanent. You can heal. It takes time, yes, but you will rise again. And I know firsthand the destructive nature of toxic love. I've played characters in movies who face this exact challenge. Men who were caught up in unhealthy relationships and who had to find the courage to let go. But more importantly, I've learned these lessons in my own life too. We all face moments when we need to walk away from relationships that no longer serve us. So today we're going to talk about toxic love, how to recognize it, and how to free ourselves from its grip. Now let me ask you something. How do you know when love has gone toxic? In movies, it's easy to see the villains, the bad guys, the ones who are abusive and manipulative. But in real life, it's not always so simple. Toxic love isn't always loud. It's not always obvious at first. Sometimes it sneaks up on you, slowly over time. You may not even realize you're in it until it's too late. But here's the thing, there are signs, and if you're honest with yourself, you can spot them. Let's talk about a few. First, there's emotional manipulation. Maybe you've been gaslighted into thinking you're the one with the problem. You feel like you can't trust your own emotions, like you're always walking on eggshells. Maybe you're told you're too sensitive, or that you're overreacting, making you doubt your own reality. Second, there's the lack of respect. True love is built on mutual respect, but in toxic relationships, one partner may belittle the other, disregard their needs, or even disrespect their boundaries. And you're not being valued for who you are, but for what you can provide, or worse, for how you make the other person feel. And then there's the unhealthy dependency. You find yourself feeling like you can't live without the person, or you stay because you fear being alone. You lose yourself in the other person. And when you try to speak up or assert your needs, you're told you're being selfish, unreasonable, or ungrateful. Now, let me share a bit about some of the characters I've played in my career. You know, I've had the honor of portraying some powerful men who had to navigate difficult situations, men who fought for their own dignity and sense of self. But what I want to focus on today is not just the roles, but the real lessons behind those stories. Take my role in Fences, a film where I portrayed Troy Maxon, a man dealing with the consequences of his own emotional baggage, mistakes, and unhealed wounds. His relationship with his wife, Rose, is complicated, full of love, yes, but also full of resentment, betrayal, and ultimately toxic patterns. Troy's inability to communicate, to admit his faults, and to let go of his old baggage destroys what could have been a beautiful relationship. Rose, on the other hand, finds herself stuck in a toxic cycle for a long time. But there comes a moment where she makes a choice. She decides she can no longer be a prisoner to Troy's mistakes. In real life, we often find ourselves in similar situations. It's not always easy to break free, and it can feel like a betrayal to let go of someone you once loved. But here's the thing. Staying in a toxic relationship doesn't make you a martyr. It makes you a prisoner. The longer you stay, the harder it is to break free. But just like in Troy, in Rose's story, you have to reach a point where your peace, your health, and your future are more important than holding on to a love that no longer serves you. And I'll tell you this, it's never easy. It might feel like your heart is being ripped out, but trust me, I've been there. I know what it's like to lose someone you love to watch everything unravel because of your own mistakes or because of a partner's inability to change. But that's where growth happens. That's where freedom is born. And that brings us to the pivotal moment. It's that turning point where the pain of staying becomes greater than the pain of leaving. That moment when you stand up for yourself and say enough is enough. I want you to think of someone you admire, someone who has overcome great obstacles. Maybe it's a character from one of my films, maybe it's someone you know personally, or maybe it's even you. Everyone has a story and everyone has a breaking point. There's a quote from The Equalizer where my character Robert McCall says, "I'm a man of a certain set of skills, and I use those skills to help people who can't help themselves." But what I want to emphasize today is not just the action of helping others, but the need to help yourself first. The true turning point comes when you decide that you deserve more than the bare minimum. When you stop accepting love that's conditional or manipulative. When you stop letting someone else's negativity dictate your sense of worth. So to wrap things up, let me remind you of something. You deserve real love. You deserve a relationship that lifts you up and encourages your growth. Toxic love doesn't do that. It stunts your growth, keeps you small. It makes you feel like you're not enough. Recognizing that you're in a toxic relationship is the first step. Letting go is the second. And while the journey won't be easy, it will be worth it. You'll find yourself again. You'll heal, you'll grow, and most importantly, you'll make room for the kind of love you truly deserve. Now I want to hear from you. I want you to take a moment and reflect. Have you ever been in a relationship that drained you, that made you question who you are? Have you ever had to break free from toxic love? Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your journey in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can all heal and support each other. And don't forget, check out our next video on self-love and healing. Because once you let go of the toxic, you make room for something beautiful.